Hello and welcome to another episode of Gary's Classic Cars. This time I'm going to feature the restoration of the 1989 Ford Fiesta XR2. This was recently purchased in July 2023 off a guy in Scotland from eBay. Told me it only needed a couple of £100 worth of welding. Stupidly I fell for it, so lesson to everybody, never take anyone's notice of what they say. So I hope you enjoy, and we'll get ready to start. So as soon as the car landed, I decided to give it a wash off because it got dirty from the journey down from the transportation company I used. Had a quick look around it, was really impressed. Had a quick whiz up the street in it, worked a treat. I thought, we've got a good one here. So I thought, I'll do a bit of a walk around, take some videos and photos and see what we're like. So I took some of the interior, really good condition apart from the non-standard radio, but I was really happy with that, thinking there's no work to be done here. So then I moved on to take the rear seats out again. Looked pretty solid. I thought, it's okay, a bit of dirt, but that's to be expected from a 33-year-old car. But all in all, really good. Carpets in good condition again. Bit of rust staining on them from the seat brackets, but I'm not sure why that happened, but must have got damp in the past. Started in the boot, and I did know there was corrosion in the boot. He did tell me that, to be fair, the seller, so that was to be expected. To the extent it was a bit of a shock. Although it just looked a little bit in the corner, it took the wheel arch and a bit of the floor and round the suspension point away, so that had to be done properly. Then I looked at the driver's side or offside. Again, that didn't look too bad. But once you get the hammer and grinder out, you tend to find these holes become bigger than what they actually are. But again, it just had to be done, so I wasn't too concerned. The horror was when I removed the body kit. It was very frustrating. There were elements of bad repairs from previous owners. I really don't understand why people put patches over patches, because it doesn't do anything to the car. It just makes them rot quicker. As you can see, there's lines of rust going down each side where they put a patch on, and it really is frustrating. But it is a 33-year-old car, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. Looked under the wheel arch, and the inner flinch panel was all corroded, and I thought that's going to be a nightmare to repair, which it was, because it's right tucked behind the wing. But hey-ho, these things happen, so I just cracked on with it. So the first part was to start the boot floor. So I cut all the rot out, ground it up best I could, and then fabricated all new pieces and with holes in, ready for plug welding. Once I cleaned it all up, got my welder out. Now I did have a new welder, so my welding's not the best in this. Had a few issues trying to set it up, but eventually got there. But the weld, although it looks rough, is very solid, and it has bit through, as you can see from the penetrations on the other side. What I did then is made a little lower repair corner section, because it had a wheel arch on in the past, and still looked really good. Although the shape wasn't perfect, they didn't cut into the whole wing. It was just the outer edge they put on, so it did keep the shape and prevented any distortion in the panel. So once I'd welded all up the boot floor, I got some black etch primer, and I thought I'll just get some paint on it to stop the dampness from the garage opening and closing the doors and any future corrosion. So there where I'm at now with that, and it looks okay. I got it as best I could. What I did then is the other side, but there was a little bit more corrosion than what I thought. The back panel edge was corroded and the boot floor, so we had to fabricate new sections and weld them in and grind them back. These are the fabricated sections I had. They were out of a decent quality, similar thickness steel, not anything too thin, because I wanted to keep the strength there, even though it's not really structural, but it's got to be solid. Once I'd done that, I started fabricating the corner pieces. Now, these are a bit tricky because there's a few curves, so what I tend to do is fabricate out of a couple of pieces, weld them up and offer them in, before then cutting round, always making them slightly larger than the corroded area, so you ensure you get all the corrosion out. The next job was to remove the rear suspension, because I had to do the inner wheel arches, which hadn't been done. So what I did then is got them off, and fortunately found a sandblaster local to me. So I sent them off for sandblasting at a reasonable cost of about 80 quid. So I was well happy with that. I then decided to move on and start clearing all the underseal off the underneath. Now I was quite lucky with this vehicle because it had been wax oiled from new with this hard wax, as you can see where the black is, although it had got discoloured from the years of road use, but it was very hard. But once I got it off, it was like brand new, where it hadn't chipped off. So I was really pleased. Took a long time to get it off, removing all the brake pipes and the fuel lines, the filler neck, but it just took forever, especially when I was on my back and probably only 400 or 500 mil off the floor. Wasn't really the ideal height for leaning up and scraping off the underseal. Managed to source some non-genuine panels. These were from a company called Magnum. I got a couple of wings because I only wanted the bottom half of the wings. I got a damaged one which was cheaper. Also got replacement floor panels, inner sills, inner arches and inner wings. Didn't cost a great deal of money, to be honest, probably less than 400 quid, which if you look at the Hillman Imps, it costs about £600 for one wing, and there's absolutely nothing to the wing. So I was quite chuffed that they were reasonably priced, the panels, and prevented me from having to fabricate quite a few. As you can see, this is where I was working in the centre of my garage with one Hillman in one side and had to bring the other one out. So I had it jacked up on axle stands at the back as best I could to start the work further towards the front of the car. The next part was the rear suspension. As you can see, this was quite heavily corroded, particularly around the strengthening areas of the inner to outer sill and where the tie bar of the rear suspension holds on. Very disappointed in this because it was heavily corroded. And what's really frustrating, as you'll see from the next few images, is people tend to just bodge things, plate after plate after plate. I really don't understand why people do this, because it's so much more difficult to do that than it is to cut off and then replace with a flange section or a folded in section. When I used to do vehicles many years ago in the garage, we always used to cut the sills off and tap well back onto bare minimum, never put a plate over. It was just, in one case here, there was 3 plates all on top of each other. Why they'd done it, I do not know. Anyway, moving on from that, we managed to cut all the rot out and then welded in new sections. Again, very difficult working underneath the vehicle because I didn't have a rotisserie to turn the car over, so I'm on my back all the time with sparks. Anyone knows who's done welding in the past, it's not nice when you get the spark up your sleeve of your overall. So once I got all my suspension back from the sandblasters, as you can see here, I X-primed it all to prevent any corrosion straight away from the dampness in the air. Even though this was now August time, it's starting to go a bit damper at nights, so I thought I'd better get it primed. So once I primed it, I thought I may as well do the top coat. So I got the 2-pack gloss out, and one evening painted it all, as you'll see from the up and coming images. It made a lot of sense to have everything sandblasted because it's so difficult to clean, particularly around the rear suspension holes, because it's really corroded. So now I've done all the repairs to the underneath. Again, the welding doesn't look the best, but it is, I reassure you, very solid and has bitten right in. It's just so difficult to clean up with the grinder, so I did my best I can. Once I got everything else done, I primed the boot floor and seam sealed it, tried to get the original look from what came from the factory, which I quite like because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to attention to detail. So I got the old masking tape out, taped some nice edges and some nice brush on seam sealer and finished it off. Once the masking tape was removed, it does look far better than just brushed on willy-nilly. Also did under the wheel arches. As I'd repaired the inner arch, I thought I'll try and replicate what was the original underseal, because I didn't want to take that off because it's this very good rubberized stuff. So where it was flaky, I flaked it off, the rest was good. I then put all the stone chip on, the brush on under seal, and dabbed it with a brush to get the little stickle effects as per the original. Following that, I then stone chipped all the underneath with a rubberized coating. I went for black because I thought, even though I'm putting silver on, at least I'll know where I've been. If I'd have got grey, I would have ended up probably really patchy because I'd have thought I'd have covered it, but I didn't. But the results were great with the stone chip. But again, a very difficult job when you're on your back, 3 or 4 foot off the floor. It's a bit of a nightmare trying to get round, and ended up covered in all sorts of underseal all over me. But hey ho, these things happen when you're in a restoration. But again, like I say, it really finished the job off, and I got the original look I wanted, ready for the top coat of the silver, which you'll see shortly. So I hope you like where we're at so far. So the next section is the offside rear suspension. As you can see, this has all been cleaned and painted and repaired where necessary, and then stone chipped ready for the final top coat. That was the completion of all the stone chipping under the rear half of the vehicle. The next stage was to paint all the ancillary items, the brake drums, suspension, components, etc. The back brake drums got quite a bit of dusting, must have been from the sandblasting and blowing out somewhere, but not sure, but wasn't too concerned. I then hung up all the suspension components and painted them in 2-pack gloss. This is quite a durable finish and makes things last quite a bit longer than normal cellulose. The next stage was to paint the fuel tank. Unfortunately, it fell off the wire and fell on the face side down, which you see, just like a piece of toast when you've jammed it. Anyway, a quick flat down and a repaint and back to normal. But it's just typical, it never falls on the face that you don't see, always on the face you see. But got the result in the end, even though I had to do it a second time, so at least it's had 2 coats and it will protect it for future moving forwards. Also managed to do all the back plates and the springs. These were all the original ones and in really good condition. Although they've had slight surface rust on, the sandblasting soon got rid of this, and I thought I'll try and keep as many of the original components as possible. This is the rear suspension arm, trailing arm. The bushes were in really good condition on this, so rather than replace them, I just repainted them. Finally, I got the boot floor and got some sound deadening applicated to it. It's not the prettiest, but it is in the boot, so there is 3 different types now, unfortunately. The textured stuff I put on, some previous textured stuff, and the smooth of the original. But once it's painted over, it looks reasonably okay. So now with all the back end in stone chip and ready for final coat, it was just a quick check over to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Moved the fuel lines down, which you can see there, and got ready for the top coat. This was the wheel arch on the passenger side, near side, with the first coat of silver. Went on really well, although a little bit difficult working back on yourself on the inner side of the arch. Then I painted all the floor, another tricky section, making sure you get inside all the brackets and not trying to miss anything around where the seatbelt mounts are. Really difficult, and took about 3 or 4 coats to get a decent coverage on it, but probably still missed some areas. But it's just one of them things, it's very difficult when you're on your back underneath the car with a spray gun, which when it's pointing upwards, the pot empties away from the outlet, so it's very difficult, even though I did have a gravity gun. But I got the results I wanted and moved on to the driver's side wheel arch again, which looks really good. Now it's all painted silver. The worst thing was though, when I come to put the lacquer on, as the base coat was not too bad bouncing back on you, it didn't seem to stick, but the lacquer was horrendous. I was covered from head to toe in stickiness, basically from all the lacquer bouncing back off all the components. Real awkward job. But if I didn't base coat and lacquer it to cover it, to protect the base coat, then it would have been no good, and it probably would have all come off in no time. However, it does look really good now it's all done and shiny. The final section in this is the boot floor. So I managed to get the boot floor down. Yes, it doesn't look pretty with different colour mats, but it is a boot floor, and I'm not going for an absolute concourse car. but a very, very good car. But it's all back to original of what it was. It's good and solid, and I'm quite happy. I didn't lacquer this because it wasn't lacquered in the first instance, so I thought I'll just try and keep on with the same. Although I did lacquer the bar where the board sits on. Anyway, enough for now, and part 2 to follow shortly. Hope everything's okay. So that concludes part 1 of the Fiesta restoration, rear end. So basically, all suspension, rear arches, boot floor, all repaired, and all the rear suspension components painted. Next is part 2, where we move on to the rest of the vehicle. And thanks for watching. See you soon.